Alrighty. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Navigating Energy Star Portfolio Manager and How to Access Your Utility Data. I just wanted to thank everyone for taking the time to join us today. So in today's session, we'll be going through the core functionalities of Portfolio Manager, defining utility data access and who needs it, discussing typical elements of utility data access solutions, and going through the process of requesting and obtaining data from your utility. And if time allows, we'll also go through a quick Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. Now, who is this training for? And hopefully you align with one of these descriptions. So today's training will be for anyone who needs assistance obtaining whole property energy consumption data in order to accurately benchmark your properties in Energy Star Portfolio Manager for required reporting to the state of Colorado. You might also be here because you are a building owner with questions about Portfolio Manager and the benchmarking process. So hopefully we can answer your questions and make sure you walk away knowing exactly how to proceed. So what is Portfolio Manager? Portfolio Manager is often used as a management tool that's just one part of a broader strategic plan to reduce consumption and costs. It is used to compare, measure, and track consumption over time, set baselines, goals, and targets, and generate metrics that reveal underperforming properties. In the case of Building Performance Colorado, Portfolio Manager is used to benchmark your property, as this tool provides a standardized format for submitting energy data, which helps to make it clear for both you as the building owner and the state to review. Portfolio Manager also offers more than 300 metrics to assess your building's performance. For energy, not only can you track your usage from natural gas to solar, but Portfolio Manager also provides metrics such as source and site energy use intensity and weather normalized energy use intensity. While water and waste are not required to be submitted to the state, you can also track your water and waste usage in Portfolio Manager. Portfolio Manager also offers several ways to compare your energy usage. You can use Portfolio Manager to establish a baseline. That baseline should comprise of 12 complete calendar months of data and is a starting point against which to compare future consumption. Once the 12-month baseline is established, Portfolio Manager can be used to establish target reduction goals for energy based on desired energy use reduction from your baseline, reductions compared to a national median, or a target Energy Star score. You can also use this tool to compare your current energy metrics to your 2021 baseline if you have your 2021 data inputted in Portfolio Manager. Your 2021 data is what the state uses for your 2026 pathway selections and goal reductions. This could be a helpful tool to see how your current metrics compare to your 2021 numbers. Portfolio Manager also allows you to compare a property's baseline to the median energy use of a national sample of similar buildings, which mostly comes from a dataset called CBEX, or the Commercial Building Energy Consumption Survey. Now, let's dive into what you need to get started in a Portfolio Manager. First off, you need the property's primary function, name, address, and postal code, the year built, and gross floor area. You'll also need your property's use details, which can vary on the property type you selected for your building. For example, the use details in an office building include things like the number of computers, while a multifamily building would include a use detail such as the number of bedrooms. And these details are considered to be the drivers of energy use in your building. Lastly, you will need your energy consumption data for the calendar year of 2024, which should be 12 full months of data. And this will typically come from your utility bills. Now, I do want to point out that if you are a building owner who plans to work with a consultant or outside party to benchmark your building, the recommended best practice is for the building owner to create the property in their account and then share it with the outside party. Portfolio manager data is proprietary and belongs to the person who is the portfolio manager account owner or the property data administrator. All right, now that we have a good background on what Portfolio Manager is, I want to start the screen share portion of today's training session and start off with logging into Portfolio Manager. Okay, so I'd like to start off here on the Energy Star home page here. And you'll go ahead to click onto the commercial buildings menu here, and then this first selection, benchmark. And that'll bring you to this page here, which is Energy Star's webpage dedicated to benchmarking with Portfolio Manager. I do want to point out on this page that there are a ton of resources here on the left-hand side. So this can be a great place to get additional resources besides our Beam knowledge base. But today we'll be focusing on the right-hand side of the screen, which has our Portfolio Manager login. Now, if you don't have a Portfolio Manager account just yet, no worries. It's fairly easy to create an account. You'll just go ahead and click on this Create Account blue text. And you'll be brought to this page in Energy Star Portfolio Manager, where you'll go ahead and enter in the relevant information in all of these prompt boxes. I do want to call out here that you cannot change your Portfolio Manager account username. So I would ensure that when you are creating an account, that the username you decide to use is applicable to your property and or your property management team. All right, so once you fill in all this relevant information, I'm going to scroll down this page here. You'll just click that Create My Account blue button, and you'll be all good to go. Now, I already have an existing Portfolio Manager account that I've already logged into, so I'm just going to go ahead and navigate to that tab now. All right, so now that we're in Portfolio Manager, you can immediately see that Portfolio Manager is run on a tabbed structure. That makes it fairly straightforward to navigate. So our home base here would be the My Portfolio tab, which you can see shows a dashboard of properties that you've added to your account listed in this light blue table to the right of the screen. I'm going to scroll down a bit. You'll also see this Manage Portfolio gray box, which is where you can transfer ownership of a property, upload and or update multiple properties, download your entire portfolio to Excel, set a portfolio baseline and or target, add sample properties to your account, or delete properties from your account. All right, scrolling back up here, I'm going to go ahead and navigate to our Sharing tab. So this tab here is where you can share or edit access to properties with other Portfolio Manager users. And this tab is also where you would quote unquote submit your data to the Colorado Energy Office for benchmarking compliance. Now, if you're solely using Portfolio Manager to report your data to the state, The My Portfolio and Sharing tabs should be the only two tabs you would be concerned with. So with that, I would like to now step into how to add a property and enter its use details in Portfolio Manager. To do so, I'm going to navigate back to the My Portfolio tab here, and we'll click on this blue button in the top left corner, Add a Property. To then be brought to the screen, Set up a property, let's get started. I'm going to scroll down a bit, and you'll see that this page is broken down into three sections: your property type, your property's buildings, and your property's construction status. I'm going to start off with selecting a property type, and I'm going to go ahead and select a multifamily housing property. But you can see here just in this drop-down menu, there are a ton of property types to choose from, and most of which correlate directly with the Building Performance Colorado program. Moving on, we'll go to the second section, which is your property's buildings. And you'll see here that we have three selections: none, one, or more than one. And I would like to note that if you are benchmarking more than one building, so in other words, a campus property, you would be selecting that more than one option. A campus property should include all properties on the campus as long as a meter is shared. The parent property should reflect energy use of the full campus. And if you have buildings smaller than 50,000 square feet in your campus, they do not have to pay a fee and are not required to have a Colorado building ID, but they do need to be shared with the state. But just to keep this example simple today, I'll just go ahead and select the one building option. All right, so our last section here is your property's construction status. For the sake of today's training, I'll just be selecting the test property option here, but all of you should be selecting that existing option since all of your properties should be built, occupied, and/or being used. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hit the Get Started blue button. And we're brought to this page, Set up a property, basic property information. So here is where you'll provide basic information about your property. So let's go ahead, add in a property name here. We'll put in our property address. And our year built value. And I do want to point out here that your year built should be the year that your property was constructed. And if your property has undergone a complete renovation that included gutting and rebuilding the interior, then you can use that year of renovation for your year built value. All right, I'm just going to enter in my gross floor area value and then my occupancy. Going to scroll down on this page here, and you'll see this second section, which is the standard IDs section. And this is where you can add in your Colorado building ID if you already have one associated with the property's address. So you'll use the drop-down here in the state/province section. You'll select Colorado building ID, and then you'll use this ID prompt on the right-hand side to enter in your building ID. And I do want to note here that Portfolio Manager is case sensitive, so I would ensure that when you're entering in your building ID, you are using all capital letters. So it would be something like this rather than using a lowercase c like this. And if you're curious on what your Colorado building ID is, I recommend checking out our Google Sheets building ID lookup. And I'm going to go ahead and put the link to that sheet in the chat now. Okay. And if you can't find your building in that lookup, I would recommend reaching out to our help desk to fill out the request for building ID form, and that'll add your building to our program. And I do also want to point out that if you have an ID associated with a local reporting program, such as Fort Collins or Denver, etc., you can request to use that ID for state reporting as well when you are requesting to add your building to our program. And if you do decide to use your local ID, you should ensure that both this city-town standard ID dropdown, so let's say I'm using a Denver building ID, make sure that this is filled out with your Denver ID, and then make sure the state/province ID prompt is also filled out with that same local ID. All right, so I'm going to delete this since I don't have any standard ID associated with this property record. And let's move on to this last box, which is, do any of these apply? And this is just where you can check any of these boxes as necessary if your property has any of these qualities. All right, so let's go ahead and hit this continue blue button. And you'll see that we have all of our basic information saved here at the top on this gray box here. I'm going to scroll down here, and you'll see that this page is where we can start to enter in our use details for our property. And I do want to point out that if you have any questions about any of these use details here on the left-hand side, you can use your mouse and hover over the term, and you'll see that Portfolio Manager provides a helpful pop-up definition. And then if you go ahead and click on the term itself, you'll see that you're brought to the full glossary definition in Portfolio Manager. Okay, so I'm going to head back to Portfolio Manager, and we'll start entering in our use detail values. And I do want to point out here for these number of residential living units, it does not matter what floor your units are on in a multifamily property. The unit count is classified based on the total number of floors in the building they are located in. So if you have a building that is 5 to 9 stories or a mid-rise building, then all of your unit count should be entered into the number of units in a mid-rise building. All right, moving on, let's enter in our bedroom count. Continue on here. And I also want to point out on this page, we have these use a default checkboxes and also these temporary value checkboxes. And I do want to say that Beam may flag your property if you select either of these boxes here. So if you do need to check either of these, I would make sure that you come back to this property's value here later after you verify that the use detail value is correct with your property team or whomever. Enter in that accurate value, deselect the checkbox, and then save that edit. All right, so let's go ahead and click on this Add Property blue button to add this record to Portfolio Manager. All right, and you can see here, we're now brought to our property record, and you'll also notice this new property level tab structure. So like the above Portfolio Manager tab structure, we have several options here to choose from. So we firstly have our Summary tab, which we're currently on, and that's just where we can see some basic information about the property we've just entered, such as this metric summary box, which will populate once we have energy data in this property. Scrolling down here, you'll see we also have our data quality checker tool. And we go over this more in depth in our Correcting Common Errors webinar. And then we also have the Sharing This Property box. And that's where we can go through the sharing tab from earlier. Moving on to the next tab here, we have our details tab. And this has all the information we just entered into this property. So if you had perhaps initially entered in the incorrect information for the property, that's no problem at all. We can easily edit our values here for our multi-family housing property use type. We'll just go ahead, hit into the action drop-down menu here, and we'll click on the Edit Use Details selection. And that'll bring us to the same page we were just on, where you can go ahead and edit any of those use detail values. And if you had accidentally left out a whole property use type, you can also use this Add Another Type of Use dropdown, and you'll add whatever property type you had left out. If you need to edit any of the basic information that we had inputted earlier, you can use this Edit blue button here to edit any of that information. And then you can also use this Edit blue button in this unique identifiers box to edit your Colorado building ID. You'll also notice that there are several other tabs here at the property level. We have energy, emissions, water, waste and materials, goals, and design. But the tabs that we should be mostly concerned with when reporting our 2024 data to the state should be the summary, details, and energy tabs. So let's now head on over to our energy tab. And you can see in this box here, there are 5 ways to enter in our bill data. So our first method would be the manual way. And then we also have a spreadsheet option, which is listed under options 2 and 3. And that's where you can upload a spreadsheet that includes your properties or multiple properties energy data. You can also hire an organization to electronically enter your data, namely a service product provider. And lastly, you can see if your utility offers an auto upload service. So I'll go ahead and put a link in the chat to the list of utilities offering aggregate data. And this is from Portfolio Manager's FAQ database. And then we also have a list in our Beam knowledge base of utility companies across the state on their methods of delivery. So I'm going to go ahead, put the link to that resource as well in the chat. All right, so now that you're aware of the various methods you can use to enter in your energy data, let's begin creating a meter on our energy tab here. And we'll start off by selecting this Add a Meter blue button. Alternatively, you can hit this Enter Your Bills button. Either way, you'll be brought to the same page. So we're brought to this page here, getting started setting up meters for whatever your property name is here. You'll also see this box below titled Sources of Your Property's Energy. And here is where you can select all the different type of energy sources found at your property. And as you can see, there are a plethora of different energy sources to choose from. So I'm going to go ahead and select electric here. And then you'll see that it already prompts us with either purchase from the grid electricity, solar, or wind. I'll just be selecting grid today. And then Portfolio Manager prompts us for how many meters we have. I'll just leave that as 1 today. You can also select multiple energy sources as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and select a natural gas meter for my property as well. All right, and once you have all of the sources of energy you would like to add to your property, you'll scroll down and hit the Get Started blue button. Now you're brought to this About Your Meters page, and this is where you will need to fill in some information about your meters, such as the meter name, the date meter became active, etc. So you can personalize your meter name here by clicking into the row, And this is where I recommend personalizing your meter name based on the information on your utility bills. And that'll make it easier for you to reference back to the meters when you're comparing against your bills. For the unit option here, I again recommend going with whatever information is on your utility bill. So let's say my utility bills for my grid meter is kilowatt hours. And that just makes it easier on you, so you're not calculating conversions from one unit to another. Then you'll want to enter in the date the meter became active. So I'll just say for this meter, it was the 1st of April in 2015. And then you use this checkbox next to the date to check if this meter is still in use or not. And if it's in use still, you'll leave this checkbox checked. And if it's not, you'll just deselect that checkbox. And then, of course, if your meter is no longer active, you should fill in the date the meter became inactive. I'm going to scroll a little bit to the right here. And you'll see this next column, which is enter as delivery. And that's most relevant for meters that are tracking something like propane or diesel delivery, which is more common for entering propane and diesel as delivery rather than something like an electric grid meter where it's normally tracked by monthly billing. All right, and then this last section here is for custom meter names, which can also be helpful to differentiate your different meters in your property. Now, once you've entered in all of the information, we'll go ahead and select the Create Meters blue button. Oops, need to enter in my units here for my natural gas meter. Alrighty, go ahead, Create Meters. Okay, and now we're brought to this page to select the meters to include in our property's metrics. And this is pretty self-explanatory, where we'll select the meters that are currently active at our property using this checkbox selection on the left-hand side. And then we'll select that these meters do account for the total energy consumption for our property. I'm going to scroll down, whoops, on this page here, and we'll hit this Apply Selections blue button. And you'll see we're brought to this page where we can manage our bills for our meters. And this page is where you'll add in your monthly entries for each meter. So if you have your utility bills, this is where you would pull them out and enter in your consumption. Now, to save some time today, I won't be going through entering meter data, but if you are curious on the process of entering in meter data, I do recommend going through our recording of Portfolio Manager 101, which I'll leave the link to in for our knowledge base recording training library. And I also want to add an FAQ link from the Portfolio Manager database, which outlines the different methods for entering in meter data. So let me go ahead and put those in the chat. Okay, so I do want to navigate to a different property at this time just to show you all what a completed property with all energy information entered would look like. So let me navigate back to my dashboard by clicking on the Portfolio Manager logo here. And I'll go ahead and click onto this completed property. So you'll see here on the Summary tab, we have this metrics summary populated since this record has a full calendar year worth of data. And this box just gives you some good intel into your property's energy usage. Heading on over to the Energy tab here, you'll see that we have our energy use by calendar month chart populated, and this is where you can see the consumption patterns from month to month. Scrolling down on the page here, we have our meter names listed in this table. So let's go ahead, click on the electric grid meter. And then I'm going to edit these display years to show all years. Scroll down a bit, and you'll see that this meter has a full year's worth of 2024 data. And one more topic I do want to cover before we head back to our slides here is the single meter spreadsheet option, which you'll find here at the bottom of this page. So you can use this blue highlighted single meter spreadsheet template to download an Excel file that you can use to upload your data into your meter, rather than manually filling out your data here in Portfolio Manager. Now I'm going to open this Excel spreadsheet that I previously downloaded from the electric grid meter. And you'll see here that Portfolio Manager provides some helpful cell notes for all of these columns here. And I also would like to note that the spreadsheet templates differ for each meter energy source. So if your property has various energy sources, I do recommend paying attention to the spreadsheet template you are using for each of your meters. All right, so that's all I wanted to cover regarding Portfolio Manager navigation. So I'm going to head back to the slides here. And pardon my scrolling here for just a second while I head to the next section today. All right, so let's head to our next part of our discussion, which is utility data access. So at the root of everything, if you want your benchmarking results to be accurate, you need to account for complete energy data. As we mentioned earlier, complete energy data in the context of Portfolio Manager is a minimum of 1 year of data, which is then used to calculate metrics. It's also important to note that you will have to benchmark your whole building, meaning that you must account for all fuels used in building operation. So in the case of properties with multiple tenants, such as a multifamily property, proper benchmarking does require that you're able to capture total consumption across all fuels across all tenants. Now, this can pose a very interesting challenge that some of you may have already encountered, which is that if you are the entity required to benchmark, but you don't have access to all the utility accounts that make up your building. So this historically has meant that you need to go and essentially tenant by tenant get their energy consumption data, or gain access to their energy consumption by requesting the utility to release the data to you. Of course, this can be incredibly burdensome, especially if you have a large number of tenants or residents at your property. So we need to be looking at other solutions for this. So there is a process that almost 80 utilities across the country have put into effect, which is the solution we refer to as data aggregation. The idea behind data aggregation is that there would be some minimum number of tenants or accounts associated with a property where it is understood and agreed upon that the utility can add up total consumption for all the individual tenant accounts and then add them together so that it's just a single meter with monthly consumption numbers reflecting the whole building. So you, as the building owner, can reach out to your utility and request this. And this helps balance the building owner's need for data access with the utilities and also protects individual data of the tenants or residents of the space. And the state of Colorado has gone even further to put this as part of legislation so that not only are building owners required to benchmark and report their data to the state, but utilities are also required to develop solutions to help those building owners obtain the consumption data needed to benchmark accurately. And there are a few expectations that the state has set forth for utilities. The most pertinent one being that it sets the data aggregation threshold at no more than 4 customers per building. But in some cases, the number of tenants in the building falls below this threshold. In that case, the utility can still provide aggregated data, but you will need tenant authorization before you can get this aggregated data from the utility, which basically says that the tenants are okay with having their consumption rolled up into the whole building's total. Now, of course, it's not ideal that you'll have to go ask tenants for authorization, but if there are three or less tenants in the space, that's a lot less burdensome than having, say, 300 multifamily units each with one tenant. So there are additional requirements that are placed on utilities in terms of how they are allowed to receive requests, how long they have to turn these requests around and deliver data, and how frequently they have to deliver data. So that was just a higher level overview of the concept of utility data aggregation. But how do you go through the process of requesting data from your utility? And as I mentioned earlier, not all utilities will follow this same exact process, but let's just discuss the general workflow. So after you get your tenant authorization or are ready to get your aggregate data, you'll go ahead and start this process. Now, of course, there are a lot of different utilities in Colorado, and many of them have processes that are slightly different from one another. But just speaking in generalities here, the typical process is that the utility is going to ask the building owner or requester to provide information that identifies the building. So that can be things like the building address, different entrances to the building if they happen to be on different streets, etc. Having different addresses associated with one property is important for the utility to understand, as typically different accounts could be associated with different addresses. So they will need all this information to find out all the parts that make up for the whole. Then, of course, the utility will compile your data and present this back to you, where then you'll go ahead and confirm that they have identified all the tenants at your property, or perhaps that the utility missed this tenant, or they accidentally included tenants that are not part of your property. So you may need to have some back and forth with your utility. Finally, the utility will deliver your aggregated consumption data back to you, the requester, via a spreadsheet delivery or upload the data directly to your portfolio manager via web services. But at the end of the day, regardless of what the exact steps are for your specific utility, the key thing here is that active participation is really important during these initial steps. Now, I wanted to step through some snapshots of what the process would be for different, but not all utilities. So, Excel Energy is a good example of where you need to log into their website or create an account if you haven't already, where you would validate yourself as the building owner or whatever role you play, so that the utility knows that you are a valid recipient of this data. The snapshot on the right-hand side of this screen here is just one part of the creation process to get your data recipient account set up in Excel. So this is just one method utilities may use. For other utilities, you will initiate your request from a form that's right on their website. And these include the company's Colorado Springs Utilities, Fort Collins Utilities, and Longmont Power and Communications. And essentially, in this case, you don't have to log into your account quite yet. A simple Google search to their utility site will bring you to the form you need. And then after you have established your request, you will have to log into your portal. But the idea here is that you can find the request form publicly. And then there are other utilities like San Isabel, Black Hills, and Atmos, where they just have designated web forms, and that is the primary mechanism that they are using to collect requests for whole building data. So in this case, it'll be important for you to fill out everything that they have asked for. And I do want to point out here that your utility company can also work through entirely web-based forms. And then there are other cases like Core Electric and United Power, where their request and registration process uses forms, but they're actually fillable PDFs. So you need to download them, fill it out, and then upload them back to the utility. Okay, so after you have submitted your request and everything has been confirmed to be correct, there are a few different methods on how to get that data back to you. So pathway one on this slide here is what is used by most Colorado utilities who offer data access solutions. And this pathway uses the Portfolio Manager API or web services to directly deliver your data to your Portfolio Manager account. So the actual steps for this are typically covered in the specific utilities guidance, but essentially you'll be connecting and sharing in Portfolio Manager, which is similar of what you would do to submit your energy data to CEO in Portfolio Manager. There's no need for you to enter data in yourself in this step, which is fairly convenient. And pathway two here is a spreadsheet delivery, which you will have to upload yourself into Portfolio Manager. And that's basically the process we briefly went over earlier today, so hopefully it wouldn't be too difficult to go through this. But either way, the utility would have provided you with the complete energy consumption of your property, which ideally should result in you having everything you need to tie up your property's benchmarking for this season. Now, I want to emphasize that it is very important to start this process as soon as possible. And as I mentioned before, there may be a couple rounds of back and forth between the requester and utility to make sure that they are capturing the entire building. It's also important for you that you do some due diligence from the utility once you get your data. I think a lot of people assume this data is correct, but if you didn't pay attention to the individual list of tenants that the utility identified, you could end up with aggregate data that is incomplete or counting tenants you don't actually have. So if you have prior years of consumption data, you could use that to compare with your aggregate data to make sure there aren't any major differences. And then, of course, immediately reach out to your utility if you see any weird values. I do want to point out here that your utility will be the one responsible to fix any issues related to their platform. Now, of course, if your utility is not responsive or you just can't get connected to someone from your utility, please feel free to bring your issues to the Colorado Help Desk, and our team may be able to assist you. But I do also want to put out there that our team does not know the inner workings of every single Colorado utility. And so, unfortunately, we are not in a position to resolve issues that are internal to the utility. But again, we are very happy to work with you in any way we can. Now, as I just said earlier, we as the Colorado Help Desk can't answer every utility question out there. We do have resources on our Beam knowledge base, so we definitely recommend checking out this Obtaining Whole Building Energy Data site here, which I put the link to earlier in today's training, but I'll put the link to it once again in the chat for you all. Alrighty. So that brings us to the end of our presentation here.